there was one fight I watched and this dude got kicked in the face and he didn't die, but I was like, oh! Okay, guys, welcome back to this podcast. This week we have myself, PK. We have
Siachi.
And then we have our special guest with us today.
Hi, I'm Flu, and I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, well, today we have, it's not really a touchy subject, but rather, I guess, passionate on both, or on three ends of the front here. We're going to talk about esports, and I guess maybe somewhat its impact on society, but whether it should be considered a sport or its own thing, and just our thoughts and opinions on that as a whole. But first, we're going to start off with, we all watched a video on YouTube called Why Fighting Games Are Better Than Fighting Sports. And I believe the creator, or the author, you could say, called Core A Gaming, his views on why fighting games are better than fighting sports were in terms of watching, and just 4 points that he made, and we'll be talking about them as well, were that the reasons why fighting games are better than fighting sports are because, first of all, there's no judges needed. Anyone can compete. I guess he said that there's hype, but that's kind of extremely subjective. And fourth, that no one gets hurt. So I guess we'll just start off by putting it out there and asking you guys, freelance, anyone, feel free to jump in. First, I guess, what are your thoughts on the video and what he had to say?
I mean, I felt that the video was definitely one-sided, and it started with the Jimmy Kimmel video, and so he portrayed it very much as now it's us versus everybody else, and why we are actually the right way. So I took, I listened to him with a grain of salt. There's some things that I agree with. And we'll get into that here in a little bit more. And there's some things that I definitely disagree with. I'm not on one extreme or the other as much. I'm more towards the middle. But yeah, I mean, I could see his arguments, and there's definitely arguments that he made that I was like, yeah, that's not a valid argument. So it's one of those things where I could appreciate what he was standing for, but when it came down to it, I was just like, oh, okay, maybe you get 2 out of the 4, so 50%. But yeah, so that's kind of where I stand on it.
Yeah, I'm on the other side. I absolutely hated the video. Every time I watched it, I wanted to punch something. So I think his points are, I think if you find a way to support something, you're gonna find reasons anyways to back that up. But it's just there's no comparison to esports and fighting video games compared to watching actual video game, actual fighting, where you actually you can go out and master, or at least train in that discipline. So you can train in jiu-jitsu or Muay Thai or boxing. That can happen. You can't Kamehameha anybody or
not
use
yet.
Yeah, not yet. Well, you can't use any of that. At the end of the day. So I did not like that video, so yeah, I'm just ready to fight it too.
So I guess we'll just start off with the first point, because I find myself trying to be more balanced. I love sports, as in I love watching football, soccer, basketball. I'm a pretty sport junkie kind of guy, but I also love esports as well. Got into it through the fighting game industry, and then expanded from there. But I guess the points that he make, I think they're fairly somewhat valid, coming from like a neutral standpoint and being on surface level. So I guess the first point that he makes is no judges needed. So what are you guys' thoughts on that? That's what makes fighting games, I guess, better in comparison to watching fighting sports, because he uses the example of the video game having life bars and a set time, as opposed to, and then he uses the Pacquiao Mayweather fight where there's a scene where Pacquiao's like, "Oh, I thought I won the fight."
Yeah.
Because there's a use of judges there.
Well, for that boxing match, if everybody knows Mayweather, he's a defensive fighter, so that is his. For a lot of people who say he's running away or this is entertaining. From a boxing standpoint, he is the best defensive boxer in history. So if you get some of these gamers looking at that, of course they're not going to understand it. So it's just that boxing match, it didn't live up to its hype. But I mean, Mayweather, it was a fight that should have been made 3-4 years earlier. But it's just from a technical standpoint, it's boxing greatness going on, and he's defensive fighting. That's what he's doing. And Pac-Man he's an aggressive fighter, so he was going in for Mayweather, but Mayweather being a counterpuncher, that's his game. So he waits for you to come in, he hits you 1-2 times, and he gets out of the way so he doesn't get hit. So that, I mean, if you don't understand the sport of boxing, then you're not gonna. I mean, I think that it's kind of arrogant and ignorant to use that and say that, oh, you don't need a judge for this. And on top of that too, judges get things for MMA too. If you're watching MMA, you don't like judges anyways. So it's just, but fighting, that's what fighting is. That's what actual fighting is. You don't know who's gonna win. But for video games, you're just mashing buttons, and that's really what it is. You're mashing buttons, and you're trying to beat somebody with a health bar. But in actual MMA fighting and watching MMA, you can actually pinpoint these techniques and see how skilled a certain person is. So I mean,
I think for me, the one thing that I dislike the most about actual fighting sports like MMA and boxing are the judges, because there are times where you grade a round to this fighter, and then all of a sudden you're like, wait, how the heck are the judges grading? Did they not see the same thing I saw? So I think more so in any other sport, fighting, boxing, and mixed martial arts, the judges have the biggest influence on the outcome.
Possibly.
And maybe basketball is the next one with the referees, but that's the thing about sports though. That's the thing about real sports, is that judges, referees, umpires are a major influence. There's a human factor to it. So even though that's the biggest part that I dislike about the sport, the reality is it's the part of the sport. That's what makes it the sport.
Yeah.
Is that you have that human element to be that, false eye, even if, it's there to try to keep everything fair, but, sometimes it goes way wrong, and that's part of sports. That's part of the agony of sports, is if your team loses because of a referee's call, you're pissed off at the ref. Everyone's pissed off at the ref. That's part of sports. That's part of the entertainment aspect of sports, that you lose when you remove the judges. You lose when you remove the referees. And, like I said, it's the part that I hate the most, because there's definitely times in fights where I totally 100% disagree with the judges. And even by unanimous decision, a lot of times I disagree with them. But it's also a part that makes it a sport, is that you do have those judges, you have those referees, you have those people that kind of keep the fight in place and in check, and to grade and to score, where you don't have that in esports.
So I guess I'll come back to a neutral standpoint again. So what he's in the video, what he's saying is in terms of watching. And so I guess I'll just ask you guys, kind of being a devil's advocate here, since both of you guys are, Siachi is more anti esports, and Flu is more, he's leaning toward the middle as much as possible. But what I'll ask is, as let's say you know nothing about either things, and you know nothing about Street Fighter fighting games at all, and you know nothing. Let's say you go into a wrestling match, like a high school wrestling match, and you know nothing about that. All you know is that two dudes are hugging each other, and the fighting games, all you know is two dudes mashing buttons. And so you go and watch both matches like in the same day, because like let's say your best friend like plays Street Fighter tournaments, and then he also wrestles at the same time. I think from his standpoint, would it be easier to watch the fighting game, or would it be easier to watch wrestling?
I think that's very subjective, though.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, I think like within my generation, because we grew up with the Super Nintendo, and we grew up with video games, watching other people play. Especially like when I was younger, we didn't have I didn't have an N64 when everyone else did. So I spent a lot of time at people's house watching them play. So it was natural for me to watch people play. And so I think as our generations grow more technological and we start watching more people play, I think that's going to shift where people would rather watch a video of people playing video games over watching someone play high school like wrestling. But again, like Siachi is saying, it is subjective. But I think the way that the Western culture is being molded at the current point and within our last, my generation to this current generation, we're seeing a shift now where you're seeing more people go, oh, I'd rather watch someone play Street Fighter. Yeah. And, I'm not necessarily watching them bash the buttons, but I'm looking at the screen, because that's more appealing to my eye. Like all the lights and all the crazy, fight moves, that's more appealing to my eyes than, say, somebody who is just high school wrestling. Because right off the bat, I don't have to know any rules. I don't have to know anything. So from my entertainment aspect, I definitely lean more towards the video games. Yeah. In terms of if I knew nothing about either of them, which one would I rather watch? I would definitely pick the video game. But seeing that I do know the rules of sports, I would lean the other way.
And I think that's just kind of to go back on what you guys said and to respond. I think that's what he was aiming for, as to if you understand both things. Yeah. And before, like in middle school, I didn't know wrestling, and everybody's wrestling's stupid. It's just like two guys hugging each other, blah 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 blah. But like I took like a wrestling class, and like I understood like a pin down means this many points. You got to reset, and if you like pin him down, you get this advantage over him and what's happening. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. But if I don't know anything about that, then obviously the video game's easier to watch and understand, because you don't understand that this pin means this many points, and after this many points, you get this advantage, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think just to respond to you guys, what you guys are saying, he's just saying that it's from a neutral standpoint where there's no understanding. It's easy to understand that, because I mean, you don't want somebody to die. You don't see health bars in real life, at least from that aspect.
Yeah. Well, like visually, obviously, video games are going to be the more appealing thing. It's just visual. Most of us are visual learners or visual people, so we can see it visually. So yeah, if it's at a neutral standpoint, obviously the most visual appealing thing is going to go to the person who doesn't know anything or any rules. So that I feel like that's kind of unfair, but from a neutral standpoint, yes, you would probably favor the video games more than anything.
Yeah, I'm not like trying to sway you guys. I'm just trying to.
You're not. Sure.
Trying to bring you guys in to see.
Come on now.
As equally as possible. But you're right. That's human nature, and judges are part of the reason why sports are sports, and that's part of the passion that makes fans so crazy, and that's why sports are the way they are. But we can move on to the next point that he makes, which he says fighting games are, I guess, better than fighting sports are because anyone can compete. So he uses the example of, like, if you're a little kid, you can still go against someone who's, like, I guess, a polished veteran and play them in a video game, as opposed to, like, me going and fighting Conor McGregor. Anyone can compete, is what they're saying,
So this is the one where I disagree on. So we could go into a competition of, like, who can paint a room better, because it's fair competition. Anyone can do it. But would I rather paint a room than to try to wrestle Conor McGregor? No. There's nothing. I think I'd rather take my chances wrestling Conor McGregor and getting beat up than, hey, Nate, let's have this competition. Who could paint this room better? So the argument that anyone can do it is not a sports argument. Like, look, these athletes, they've been training their whole life. They're naturally gifted. That's why they're here. That's what makes sports unique. That's why we spend hours watching football, basketball, hockey, whatever sport we enjoy watching, because these guys are the elites of the elites. There's a reason why no one watches minor league baseball. There's a reason why no one watches the Canadian Football League, because those guys aren't the greatest of the greats. So if we wanted, like, we're going back to the little, a kid soccer where everyone gets a trophy, then fine, we can go to that mentality. But I'm not down with the mentality of, hey, anyone can do it. You know, you can compete with like the greatest. No, you're button mashing and you get a couple lucky hits, and that's why, you know, you're competing against, you know, this elite of the elite in terms of this video game player. So I feel like that's not a very valid argument.
Yeah, I think with there's still skill levels. Like they're saying anybody can compete, but there's still differences in skills in how you play that video game or play that fighting game. So yeah, I mean I could join a game too, and exactly like what Louis said too. You can button smash and you might get lucky and you might win, but for the most part, these professional gamers, there's still levels to their skills. So that's the same thing with MMA and boxing. I could go box, but I mean anybody can go box, but that doesn't mean you're gonna win or come out alive or anything like that. So like MMA, like right now, I have no MMA anything. I haven't trained in MMA, but I could go to an MMA gym and still spar with other people or have a underground fight. But that's still, I mean, there's still levels to what they're doing and what real fighting is. So I mean, obviously you won't get hurt if you're playing video games, but I think that I just think it sounds weird because they're so like they're complete opposites of each other. One is actually physical, the other one is just you're just watching a game or playing a game. So yeah, I mean it's easy to say go ahead and just anybody can join, and it's just I mean what type of competition is that? Esports is I don't consider it a sport. So like you need competition, you need actual it's actual physical training for something to be a competition, a sport. So I think that it's easy to say because it's a video game, anybody can do it, and literally anybody can do it. So my 3-year-old can probably play a video game too, and that's just how it is though. That's the system. That's what a video game's supposed to be anyways. So anybody can play.
But let's not stretch too far into that yet. We'll keep it on the surface for now. We'll move on to the third topic. We'll get into the topic of sports versus esports in a little bit, but we'll go on to the third thing that he said, which I kind of disagree with. But he said hype, where he uses a comparison where hype is not just because in MMA fights he describes hype as weigh-ins, so you get hype about the fight, or hype as opposed to when you watch a trailer for like a new movie, you're like, oh dude, I'm hyped for this movie, it's coming out. And he uses hype in fighting games as various different moments during a competition or the fight or the game itself where there's the two people pitted against each other and there's time runs out, or like one person's getting hit and you're like, oh, this hype is about to die, oh, he didn't die, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I mean, at least for me, I'm trying to stay as neutral as possible. I kind of disagree with that because hype's extremely subjective.
Yeah.
So I mean, because there was one fight I watched and this dude got kicked in the face and he didn't die, but I was like, oh, so it's what it is.
I mean, to a degree, I actually agree with him. So this is one of those points I actually do agree with him. But again, hype's subjective, and hype is based off of like an emotional response to something that you expect or didn't expect. But more, not so much the hype aspect, but then the fact that it draws people in emotionally in a way that, is very unique. So I actually do agree with him. I used to make fun of people that watched gamers until, my siblings informed me that in Japan and Korea, like hundreds of thousands of people would just sit there to watch people play. And you're seeing that more and more in the United States as well. And I'm sure Canada and everywhere else. So this is growing globally. So here's the thing. If this is becoming the second most popular sport behind soccer in terms of people internationally watching it, then we have to kind of take this, hype argument somewhat serious. Because we have to go, oh, well, people all over the world are, sitting here watching people play, then maybe there is something to this hype argument. Now, hype from how you described it and how he described it, yeah, okay, that's a little bit subjective. But, more on the aspect of it's drawing people in emotionally and it's drawing a large crowd to respond emotionally, then yes, there is quite the hype to this. But, you know, if we're just going based off of like how loud you can scream and yell, then no, I disagree with it. But from the aspect of it's drawing in fans, then yes, there is something about this hype of esports.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen the hype video. I mean, just watching that video and seeing people get hyped. For me, it just didn't connect to me. Like it is an emotional based event where if you know the game and you know how it's played and you know the people who are playing and you see the health bar go down or whatever and you get hyped about it, and there's probably more opportunities when you're playing video games to have more of those moments. So I kind of understand that the opportunities to get hyped is probably higher than most, because if you're watching an MMA fight, you're not guaranteed a knockout, you're not guaranteed a submission or just a slugfest. You're not guaranteed any of that, but there are still moments in MMA or boxing where you can get even more hyped because somebody gets stunned, he goes down for a flash KO, gets back up and comes back with a right and knocks out the other guy. I mean, that's hype. That's pure emotion right there too. So the chances of getting hyped up for a video game, I think, is a lot higher. The chances for watching if you're watching boxing, I think everybody knows boxing is more of a, it's just throwing hands, and it's very technical. So the chances of knockout, they're wearing bigger gloves too, so the chances of knockouts are probably less. So if you're watching boxing, because boxing, there's still a lot of fans for boxing, and if you're watching boxing, you can still get hype if you're a diehard boxing fan. But for the most part, everybody who watches boxing, it's not as hype. But if you see an MMA match and you see somebody get knocked out, you're gonna get hyped up, or a sweet sweep or something into a submission. You're gonna get hyped up. So I think the chances of getting hyped up in video games is a lot higher. And MMA, since it is real, Nate, since it is real, then it's the chances of getting hyped is not as much in terms of just somebody neutral coming to watch.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that in terms of like you're gonna have less opportunity to be hype in MMA, but I think that's actually where this argument actually wins for this guy making this argument, is that there is more hype in video games. And I think all three of us here are big Tim Tebow fans, and we remember the hype of like the last 2 minutes of any of the Broncos games. And so having that raw emotion of like, this is going to happen. Oh my goodness, this is crazy. We don't know what's going to happen, but we know this is going to happen. In MMA, you see it once every, blue moon. But when it does happen, it's exciting. But in video games, you do have the more opportunities to have those raw emotions just yell out of you. It brings us back to those Tebow days, and it brings us back to all other sports where there's those last second shots or something crazy that happens. In MMA, very rarely do you see a knockout within like the last few seconds of a fight where it's a close fight and there's a knockout that like last few seconds. Like you just don't see those opportunities. But again, that's just kind of the nature of the sport. So it's hard to like knock off a point from the sport because that's not the natural nature of the sport. But, in terms of this argument, I'll give a point to this guy's argument here just because I could see his argument making sense to me.
Yeah, I think just to widen it out a little bit, this is going off a little off topic, but I think I realized hype is probably the reason why we enjoy underdog stories so much. Like why we enjoy watching like PKs for soccer or like penalty shootouts for hockey and things like that. Because if you don't understand like soccer from a really big standpoint, but like it comes down to PKs, and you're rooting for one team, and you understand. You're like, dude, like if one guy misses, this is over. So I think from a big standpoint, you guys are right because in saying that video games have more opportunity because let's be honest, it's not too many PKs that happen.
Yeah.
Not too often, and let's be honest, the teams don't really want to go down to PKs.
Yeah.
So at least in what you guys said here, I think it makes a lot of sense where video games have a lot more opportunity. But we can move on to the fourth point that he said. So he says the reason why fighting games are better than fighting sports in terms of watching is because no one gets hurt. And I mean, I understand that the physical nature of fighting sports is the reason why it is what it is, and it's kind of like saying, like, I mean, yeah, go for it, guys.
So, I don't want to offend anyone, but that's like the pansy way of like defending your stance. Like, hey, no one gets hurt, so that's why this is more awesome. Like, that's part of sports. Even basketball, which is like a no touch sport now, is more physical. That you see a physical aspect to it. So, it's one of those things where any sport, there has to be some sort of contact. If there's no contact at all, it's debatable if there's if it's a sport. I mean, I have cuts on my hand from fishing. So, there's more, so the argument that no one gets hurt is definitely the pansy way of saying, this is legit because nobody gets hurt. Like, we're such into the, like, everyone's feelings matters, everyone's, how you feel matters, that's not, like, somehow that's become an argument within our culture, but that shouldn't be an argument. No one gets hurt. It's just, I don't know.
Cop out.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like a real argument for me.
Yeah, I think, sports are, they're meant to, like, as human beings, our bodies are capable of so many things and so many amazing things. So to be able to push your body to a point where you didn't even think you could is what makes sports kind of amazing. It's like if you're training for basketball, you're waking up early, you're shooting, you're actually putting time into crafting your skills. And when you play your basketball games, there's always an opportunity to get hurt because it's real. It makes you just see reality. It's just reality. It's real. You're actually doing something. And like for fighting, MMA fighting or any type of fighting, it's real. It's physical. Yeah, it's physical contact, and it's how you're pushing yourself. And at the end of the day, you can physically, like, even for like body lifting or bodybuilders, you're pushing your body. You can actually see growth from pushing yourself, and being hurt's always there, but that's what you do. That's what a sport is for, is to push yourself to limits that you couldn't even think you could get to. But with video games, obviously, I mean, you can get thumb cramps, so I guess so. Like, the argument of not getting hurt, and it's weak. I don't understand it because I mean, if you're in this life just to cruise by and not get hurt, then it is what it is. But if you played like Modern Warfare, there are some evil kids like talking trash to you. So I think you could get hurt.
Yeah, I think
physically.
I think from an emotional
mentally.
stance, you can actually get really hurt in games, and nobody likes to lose. And if you're in front of thousands of people, doesn't matter what you're doing. If you're giving a speech or whatever it is, if you mess up, and there's people to see it, you're going to be embarrassed. There's going to be an emotional hurt to it. So the argument that no one gets hurt, I've heard of stories of people dying from playing video games because they play too long and they don't eat. So, if anything, there might be a higher death rate in video games than there is in actual fighting. And so, the argument that no one gets hurt isn't necessarily a true argument anyway. Now, by me saying that there's emotional damages and there's death, that doesn't make it more so a sport because there are these instances, but at the same time, there are those instances where extreme cases do happen where people do die playing esports. So he can't really make this argument that no one gets hurt because there are cases of people getting hurt emotionally, mentally, and then again physically with those stressing their bodies out.
I think the biggest thing, just like you guys saying, I will agree saying that no one gets hurt is a really big cop out. But I think just to kind of take this off into a new bigger broader area. Like it hasn't been just happening recently; it's happened a lot. But the biggest thing about esports is that a lot of these guys, are really young, so they're like 15, 16, and I would say not every single one of them, but a lot of them, the reason why they come to video games is because they have been bullied, and so they find a way to escape. And so they already have that kind of mental damage and emotional damage, and they don't. The bullying aspect is big, and so what happens? They get big, they play video games, they get big at that, they get good at that, they become a pro. And then they do well for like a certain time, and then they drop off, and people immediately start saying, "Dude, this guy sucks. He stinks. Get rid of him." And let's say there's like a team. Let's say like Nike has a team, just for example. I don't think they do, but for example, Nike has a team. Nike has this dude named Bob. Bob's great for like a year. Bob's the best. Bob beats everyone, but then suddenly, for some reason, next year Bob sucks. Bob loses to Timmy, and Timmy's this nobody. Timmy begins to rise. What happens? The crowd switches Timmy instead of Bob, and that's when like the emotional damage starts to hit because this guy's young, and so at least that's what I see as the more damage that happens in esports, because I see it a lot, and they're starting to hire psychologists to be team psychologists to make sure that hey, don't look at this because we know that everyone's gonna be like hating on you because you lost or you messed up at this point, and so we don't want that to happen. So they're starting to hire sports psychologists to come in and help them to, I guess, mentally prepare or before and after games. And just like how you said, like people don't they don't eat right. Yep. People die. They've hired professional cooks to come in and cook meals in ways that allow them to.
Yeah, I need to become a gamer. Forget everything I just said. Yeah. I'm gonna become a gamer now.
They hire people to cook meals that are healthy for them. Because there's a video, there's tons of videos about it, but there's a video where there's a guy because they lived in a gamer house, and there was a guy who lived, I think it was like Mountain Dew, Doritos, and Taco Bell.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's not healthy.
It wasn't too healthy for him, so he had some problems, and then so that's why they even have physical trainers to make sure that they're regimented throughout the day. They can play video games for this amount of time, then they work out for this amount of time to make sure that the body exerts this amount of, so that they're not just kind of getting pudgy the entire time. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But
I mean, let me start by saying that the bullying aspect is an unfortunate thing that happens within every culture. It's something that I faced when I went to school. And so I can understand from that standpoint of, this sucks, so I need to figure out something to do. So, unfortunately, bullying is the reality of humans. And so, I understand how they need to deal with it. But, I think it's part of how our culture is being raised, even in real sports now, is that everybody gets a trophy, nobody gets cut, and so the way people are raised now is like everyone gets a award, and so we're seeing the results of this is that when you do get cut, when life does happen, people don't know how to respond, especially if all of us here are millennials. Our millennial generation is facing this in the real world now, where if you don't get what you want, all of a sudden, like, life falls apart. You don't know how to respond. And so, I don't want to get too far into this because we're talking about social commentaries now. But, I think that's just kind of the reality of the situation. And this kind of shows a part of gaming that's not the so much positive side. And it's just like any other part of the world. I hate to put it this way, but I guess we just have to learn how to deal with that, and rather than
first world problems.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't necessarily feel bad for gamers, and that doesn't even help this argument even more. If anything, that really pushes this argument way out of the way.
And video games. All of us, I think, we've played video games. Also, they're meant to take you out of reality. So once you come back to reality. And you can't, if you're playing video games for all your 15 years of life, and you're in a different reality. I mean, that's what it is. So you're behind a TV the whole time. You might have some of your gamer friends, but when that TV turns off and you got real life to deal with, you don't have experience because you just been playing video games the whole time. So video games are meant to take you into a different reality. So once reality comes back, then how are you going to deal with people making fun of you? How are you going to deal with losing, how are you going to deal with all these things? Because that's real life problems. And, if you're stuck in video games the whole time, then you're not going to know how to deal with it. So it's unfortunate that that's been happening. But, these gamers, they just need to, take a step back and just, come back into reality, stop playing the video games. And that's what I feel like you need to do, because we have been bullied. I've been bullied. I've talked about it too on our last podcast. So it's like you just have to deal with it. But with video games, you can hide behind everything, and you can just that's why people love Skyrim too. Skyrim takes you into a whole new reality, and League of Legends, is that what it's called? Yeah. It takes you into this mystical magician power type world, so you feel like you can do all and one thing too, have you guys seen that video where it's it's bad, but that guy, there's a meme going out where this guy is he's talking trash to a black guy in class, and then the meme is when you're not playing video games, you can't talk trash. So he's like this geeky kid, and he starts talking trash to this black kid, and the black kid, that's real life. So you can't, when you talk trash on video games, it's whatever.
Yeah.
But when you're talking trash in real life, the black kid chased the nerdy kid out of the classroom. It's bad, but that's how it is, It's you get stuck in that reality if you can talk trash to anybody, or do anything to it. So when you meet reality, it changes things. So
yeah, I've had a lot of 12-year-olds talk a lot of trash on Modern Warfare.
It's crazy.
Yeah, I wonder, man, if you and I were eye to eye, I don't know what I would do.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's dirty too, man.
I think that's the biggest thing for me about esports, is that the people there don't know how to handle losses. They handle losses very poorly. They handle criticism very poorly. I think I'm dude, if you look at 100% of people playing sports professionally, they get all sorts of criticism. Yeah. And they handle it however they want to handle it. But a good percentage of them handle it pretty well.
You can make the argument that some athletes don't handle it very well.
No, yeah, I would agree with that too. But I think esports still has to learn a lot about learning how to handle criticism.
Yeah. I think once you get to professional sports, that level, they're trained by PR specialists.
That is true.
To even if they don't like the criticism, to handle it in a very calm manner. So, there's a certain kind of training that goes into professional athletes. But I would say they don't necessarily enjoy the criticism. I don't think Peyton Manning ever said, hey, I can't wait for you guys to criticize me. So, but I think they've been trained and paid to be trained to say certain things.
There's teammates too. Again, you're doing it physically. You're working together, and you're pushing each other through things. So, when it does happen and you get criticized, you have people who are right there say, yo, we'll get it next time, we'll take care of it. But yeah, when you're playing video games, I know there's teams and stuff too, but for the most part, when you're playing by yourself, if something goes wrong, who's gonna pick you up?
I think that's another big point too, because when you, at least physically, when you physically suffer with someone and you gotta run 2 miles with someone,
you can relate.
Yeah, you're dude, that was hard, and there's growth there. But then sometimes I watch professional esports, and there's a team and they won, and yeah, it's great, we won. But I'm dude, it's so awkward. Where's your relationship outside of the game?
Yeah.
I understand you might have done training, you might have trained this much in this aspect of the game. You might have done this with the team, but there's a difference when you suffer through physical training. There's a bond that happens.
Yep.
But that's I guess that could bring us to the topic of what we're moving on to next, which is sports versus esports. Obviously, at least in my opinion, I don't think esports are sports. I think that it should be highly separated from each other. I think esports as a thing is okay. I support it. I watch it. But do I think esports is a sport? No. What do you guys think?
I think as the entertainment aspect, the video game aspect, the video game industry evolves, it can become a sport. because we're seeing that virtual reality is becoming more and more a part of the industry, and it looks
a possibility
like
now.
it's a possibility. And we saw with like the Nintendo Wii, they really tried to get you active. They actually had sports games where you were physically active. So the potential is there for it to become a sport. So I'm not going to just say no right off the bat that it doesn't belong in this category. But I'm going based off of potential and not currently. So currently I say it's not a sport. But I would say potentially it has all the right tools and and it's progressing towards the potential of becoming a sport. Like there's talks of a virtual reality game where you have pads on you, and when you get shot, you actually feel the shock there. If all of a sudden that becomes a reality of playing video games, then all of a sudden we can't make the argument that this is no longer a sport. Because there is the physical pain, and then there is the hype aspect, and people can get hurt. So all these arguments that he's saying, well, it shifts to, okay, maybe this is a sport. But as of right now, I would say it deserves its own category separate from being a sport. But eventually there is possibility of it becoming a sport.
Yeah, I would agree with that too. I think right now for sure it's not a sport. If anything, it should be in an entertainment bracket, because it is entertainment. That's really what it is. But yeah, with the possibility of virtual reality, which I think for it to be considered a sport to me is you actually have to physically be moving or physically be using your body. So if they get to a point where you can, like, if it's like a video game where you're actually strapped down with a harness or something, and you're actually running and moving and doing stuff like that, jumping up around, and there's a platform where you can see that too in virtual reality, then yeah, I would consider that would be a sport, because you're moving around, you're physically doing it, and they're just translating it into some type of virtual reality where people can see what's going on. But yeah, if you're not moving and you're just playing with your thumbs, I don't consider that a sport. And it definitely should just be in an entertainment type bracket where it's entertainment or something. But esports is just.
And I'm gonna play devil's advocate here real quick, just to think like how anyone listening to us would probably think if they disagreed with us. But you said that it belongs to entertainment. They would argue that sports should belong in an entertainment category and not so much sport. So we're thinking of sports as us playing it rather than watching it. Because when we're watching the Super Bowl, we're not or if I'm watching a big fight, I'm not physically doing anything either. And so for us to say, well, how I view sports is not entertainment, but it's sports, it's this category, then the gamers would argue, well, we belong in that category too, because you're spending as much energy watching this fight as we are. So, from that argument, we got to be careful on how we categorize esports.
Because I mean, for the most part, it's called sports entertainment already. So I think, like, sports entertainment, you're watching it because you relate to it, because you can go out and actually do it. So that's why we have that sports connection, and then that's why we're entertained by it when we watch it. But for esports, it's just, no matter how you spin it, all you're doing is playing a video game, and that's like you can't defend it, because all you're doing is playing a video game. All you're doing is just smashing fingers. Even when you're playing it, you're not moving anything but your hands. And I mean, your mind might be trying to figure out a scheme to play the game, but in the end, you're just sitting down on your butt playing a video game. So since we don't play on the professional level, yeah, I mean, wrestling is called sports entertainment, but anything sports or anything that you can make money off is entertainment in itself.
WWE wrestling.
WWE wrestling. Yeah, WWE wrestling is called sports entertainment. But it's something that you can relate to, and you can do it physically by yourself. So when you come and watch it, you can relate to it because you've done it. But for video games, again, categorizing it as a sport, it's just you're still not doing anything physical.
Yeah, I think one thing that I just thought about is that when we go to when you want to go buy video games from a store, it's in the entertainment section.
Yep.
And when you want to go get a basketball, it's in the sports section. And like in the act of doing, like, because obviously when you watch something, that's entertainment no matter what it is. So in the way that if we watch the Super Bowl, that's entertainment. If we watch people play video games, that's entertainment. If we play video games, that's entertainment. However, if we go out and actually go play basketball, that's different.
Yeah.
That's just my thoughts on it.
Yeah, I mean, playing the sport and then watching the sport,
It's different.
it's definitely very different. And so I guess from the counter argument that we would be hearing from these e-gamers is like, how is you watching sports different than us watching ours? Like, there's not any difference.
Yeah, and that aspect, I don't think there's a difference.
Yeah.
When people say like, well, "Why you watch people play video games?" I'm like, well, I mean, it's just how you spend your time. But in the aspect of actually playing video games versus going out and running,
Yeah.
doing a sport, I think there's a big difference there.
Yep. I agree.
I think the hardest thing though is like if you look past it, that like at the end of the day, again, you're just watching somebody play video games,
Yeah.
and that's what gets me, because I think he said if you enjoy wasting your time or whatever he said, then it's not really wasting your time. But if you look past all that, again, it's still, what did you do today? Oh, I watched somebody play video games, and then that's it. And then if you ask somebody who watched sports, then like, oh, I watched somebody, shoot a basketball. I watched the Cavaliers and Warriors play. Now I'm gonna go out and play basketball. That's where it comes back to like, okay, so what can actually be productive? And at the end of the day, it's just video games. And that's why if you're wasting your time watching video games, then, whatever, do what you need to do. But the thing is, if you're watching sports, you can go out and actually do that sport. That's what sways me in saying, watching sports, it's a little bit different because you can go out and do it and be physical. But if you watch video games, you can play video games. At the end of the day, you're still just playing video games, doing nothing.
Yeah, and I think, like, if you're going to spend your time watching people play video games, that's your time. I can't tell you how to spend your time. I'm not going to say it's a waste of time. If that's how you choose to spend your time, entertain yourself, be at it. I'm not going to judge you, and hopefully you don't judge me for watching the Super Bowl, It's just the reality of the situation. I can't force anybody to like the same things I like, and they can't force me to like the things they like. So I'm not going to judge you based off of that. But the argument that it's a sport, I think that's an argument that they should just stay away from, and that they're watching a sport and that this belongs in the category of sport. I think that's just something that they should just stay away from, just because it's not really a battle worth fighting for. Not right now. Again, as the industry evolves, then maybe we can get into this debate and make a more realistic debate. But I think right now, this is just us chattering more than an actual real debate.
Yeah.
What I'm not against is them making money though. So if like esports guys, if they're getting paid, get your money, get paid. I don't mind you getting paid for doing that. So get paid, do what you need to do, get paid, get your money, because there's money out in the world, so whatever you can do to get money. So I don't mind them being professionals and playing video games and winning money, or having that possibility of winning money.
Yeah. Let's be honest. If somebody paid us to play video games, all three of us would be like, I'm down.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna say, oh, you shouldn't. Like, it's a profession. So if YouTube was paying me to post videos of me playing video games, I would totally do it. Unfortunately, I'm not good enough to do it. But, so I'm totally down with them doing that.
Yeah.
I guess to bring it into a bigger, moving it from esports, you talked about just using your fingers and just sitting down. My question to you is chess a sport?
From what I've said about being physical, then I would not consider chess a sport, although you do need skills to definitely do it, but I wouldn't call it a sport. It probably needs a category in itself also, because I consider cheerleading more of a sport. When you're actually at the competition level.
Not the.
Yeah, yeah, not just the cheering, but at the competition level. Like if you see that these people putting in time, putting in work, and physically putting their bodies on the line. So I consider cheerleading definitely more a sport than chess. Chess needs to. I feel like it does need its own category also.
Yeah, as a guy that's played chess before and been beaten at chess really badly, I have a great appreciation for chess. I appreciate the strategy behind it, the mental thinking, the mental preparation, the thinking 3 steps ahead. You know, my brother's great at chess, and it's amazing to watch him play chess and make other people look like fools. So there's a great appreciation for chess, but I don't think chess is a sport, and I agree with Siachi that chess should be in its own subcategory. You know, is chess more of a sport than video games? You know, there is a competition aspect of it, but there is in video games. I don't know. That's hard to say. But I would say I agree with Siachi that chess deserves its own subcategory.
I feel like for the both of it, because chess, I agree with you guys that chess is not a sport as it's not physically exerting, but at least skill wise, you can tell when you playing someone good and you just lose completely. And so I think it also deserves its own sort of subcategory. It's just hard to define because we can move on to like things such as hunting and fishing, where
that's definitely a sport.
I mean, you can there's competition. Like you can go out and do a tournament for like who can like the biggest bass you get. And I mean, I fish, you guys fish. I enjoy fishing, but I'm like, dude, is this a sport? Because I'm physically exerting. I mean, there's some skill to it, and there's a lot of luck to it too.
There's a lot of, I mean, Siachi's brother-in-law Tim, like he puts in no other skills. He does nothing except for cast and reel, and the guy catches more fish than anybody I know. Yeah. And he has like no other talents that beyond our fishing talents that would allow him to catch more, other than he just casts it to the right place and just happens to catch more fish. You know, so yeah, there is definitely luck to it, but I think luck is in every sport though.
That's true.
You know, there's definitely times where, you know, a fighter throws a swing and it just happens that swing caught the right part of the jaw. So luck is a part of sports. So we can't say, oh, well, because there's so much luck, this is no longer a sport. But yeah, I mean, as an avid fisherman and hunter, it's hard for me to argue that it's a sport, but, you know, as someone that's actively involved in it, I like to think of it as a sport because of, you know, all the physical aspects of it. You know, people think, oh, fishing is not that physical. Like, I'm pretty beat up from fishing. Like, my body, like, aches sometimes when I come back. Like, my hands are cut up. My body just sunburnt. And, you know, my feet hurt. So, it can be very physically exhausting. You know, sometimes I need to take vacations from fishing. That's how stressed fishing can be. But, you know, it's hard for me to make that argument that fishing and hunting is a sport. But, you know, as an active hunter and fisherman, I like to think of it as a sport. So that's my bias thinking into it.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I can put a category on it if it is a sport or not. Because, I mean, I've gone fishing and I'm not an avid fisherman. And, like, when I fish, I don't use any energy. So, I wouldn't know because I don't do it enough. And it's, again, going back to, like, using your body physically, I wouldn't know how to relate. Because you guys are saying it hurts, but I don't know. I don't know how to relate to it. So, but right now, I think it probably should have its own category again. Not necessarily a sport, but I know it takes skill, definitely. And, again, Timmy, my brother-in-law, he is, like, when he's fishing, he catches. And if I go right next to him, I'm not catching.
He'll use the exact same thing, cast in the exact same spot.
I don't know what it is, if he's twitching it differently or whatever, but, you know, I know it does take skill to read the lake and know the timing, the seasons, the water temperature, and all that stuff. So I know it takes skills and technique to be a fisherman, but I don't know.
I think hunting is definitely more of the physical aspect than
Yeah.
fishing. I tend to lose more weight during fall and winter than I do any other time in the year.
Yeah.
Like, just because hunting is just physically draining.
Walking,
tracking. Like, I'll hike like 14, 15 miles in a day. And then, by the time you're back, your legs feel like jello. And, you're carrying like 50 pounds in your back. And so I think physically, hunting is definitely more draining than fishing. And I think that's why hunting, as a hunter, it's more rewarding at the end when you get something than fishing.
Yeah.
So I would make the argument that hunting is closer to a sport than fishing is.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's thousands of people that watch the Bassmasters every year. I can't name any other fisherman other than Kevin Van Dam. But does that make it less of a sport? I don't know. It's hard to say.
Yeah.
I can only name like one NASCAR driver, so.
Oh man, don't get me started on NASCAR. I guess I mean we have some time to venture into that too. What do you guys think about NASCAR?
They're very talented drivers. Don't get me wrong. They're some of the best drivers in the world, but there's just something about driving a lap 400 times that just doesn't really excite me. Some people say the hype at that last lap. I'm like,
why don't you guys just do that once?
Yeah, I think more people watch NASCAR for the accidents than they do for the unfortunately than the actual race itself. But as a non-NASCAR fan, I'm not gonna get too much into it because I'm just gonna offend people the more I get into it.
Yeah, I don't know too much about it, so I'm not gonna say much about it. I mean, you are just driving a car, but I don't know what skills you need to do that. So
now they're driving like souped up Camrys. If they were driving just a standard Camry, that'd be impressive. Yeah. But they're driving up souped up Camrys.
I mean, like the one thing I respect about it is at least the pit crews.
The pit crews is quite.
That's crazy.
Those guys are good.
Yeah.
At least in that, there's the teamwork aspect where you gotta crank up the car, gotta
change tires,
get everything right on time.
I mean, the drivers are impressive too. I mean, if you guys have watched the Pepsi commercials of Jeff Gordon, where he goes under disguise and just drives people around. I mean, some of the things he does, it's quite impressive. So I'm not going to take anything away from these guys' driving skills. I can't compete on a driving level as them, but man, to sit in a car for like 4 hours driving in a circle, I don't know. It's hard for me to make the argument that that's a sport. But again, I don't want to get more into it, or else I'm going to offend a lot of NASCAR fans or a lot of racing fans. I think the Grand Prix stuff where there's like, it's more than a circle. There's actually like you're weaving around. I have a great appreciation for that. But yeah, NASCAR is one of those that it's hard for me to. But then, I've heard NASCAR people debate about races, marathons. Is marathon really, a sport? Because they're doing the same thing. So I don't know.
I mean, that's when, because you're physically exerting.
Yeah, you're physically exerting. But they would say, well, we're in a hot suit, in this exhausting car. I don't know. It's one of those things where it's become so subjective and blurred, but that's a tough one.
I mean, at the end of the day, for me, I mean, I don't like watching it. I can't watch it. Do I respect it? Yeah. I mean, I can't. I mean, I cannot drive 200 miles an hour in the lap. I'd probably crash and die. But I mean, do I enjoy watching it? No. Do I consider it a sport? Probably not. But do I respect it? Yes, it earns its place. People watch it because it's a high level of whatever they're doing.
Mm-hmm. My standard for sports used to be if you're on ESPN, then you're a sport. But then now they're like allowing WWE on there.
Kim Kardashian's on ESPN.
Yeah, so now I'm like, okay, ESPN, you've lost a lot of credibility with me.
Yes.
So I've now stepped away from that argument. But my argument used to be if you're on ESPN, then you're a sport. But yeah, now I'm taking my step back. From that.
Yeah. I got nothing to say.
Yeah, well, I mean, it seems that sports has a lot more to it. We'll just stick with what we know and what we enjoy. For people out there that, I guess, enjoy, esports. Enjoy what you want to do. Siachi doesn't like it, so don't let him bother you about it.
Yeah, just my opinion.
Just his opinion. He doesn't like it. I enjoy it. I also enjoy sports. This doesn't mean you, because I feel like there's been a great divide between the two.
Yeah.
Between the two. So I mean, if you like, I like both. I enjoy playing football, soccer, volleyball, basketball, but I also enjoy watching and playing video games too. So you do what you want to do with your time. It's almost essentially, but I mean, I can see what we talked about throughout this podcast about hype, judges, no one gets hurt, physical exertion as a sport, different definitions of where things should be placed. Any closing thoughts from you guys?
I mean, I like watching people play video games. I'm not gonna lie, like probably more so now than me actually playing video games. But I've never been a big gamer. My brother's been more of a gamer than me. So it's entertaining to watch people play games as long as they have funny commentary on it or there's a good storyline, and I know I'll never complete the game. So I don't mind watching games, but yeah, there's definitely something about it that I'm just like, yeah, it's not really a sport. But I'm not judging anybody. If that's you, do you.
All right, yeah. So, esports is, again, I think at the end of the day, it's just video games. So it probably should not be considered a sport currently right now. But again, I like playing games. I don't like watching people playing video games. That I still don't understand. But, I don't mind professional gamers or anybody playing video games aspiring to get paid to play video games. And that's you do what you need to do to get paid. But yes, I wouldn't consider it a sport. And I think watching actual real sports, that it will always lead you to want to do it and actually go out and play the sport. So that's why I prefer watching like actual sports and MMA and boxing and all these type of things. But yeah, and I think that's really all I got to say. But if you guys have been watching, what do you guys think about Conor McGregor and Floyd? Who do you think is gonna win?
So you're gonna be mad at me about this, but I think Floyd Mayweather's gonna win. I think it's gonna be a boring fight. I think Floyd's gonna do what he did with Pacquiao and just hug and defend and hug and defend. I mean, is it possible that Conor knocks him out? Yeah, it's possible. Is it likely? Probably not. I think it's going to go to the judges. The judges are going to call it in favor of Floyd. Conor's always been in great shape. If Conor's my height, if I could look like Conor McGregor, I would be like, my life would be set. But, he's in great physical shape. But one thing that people always, rag Conor on is that he'll get gassed out. And this is one of those things where he'll be boxing the whole time. And so I think that the potential of him gassing out and, it becomes just a defense fight. I don't think it's going to live up to the hype. Will I watch it? Absolutely. Will I pay for it? Absolutely. But I actually don't think that Conor McGregor really stands much of a chance.
My money is on, if I was a betting man, my money's on Floyd, but I want Conor to win.
Your money says Floyd, your heart says
Conor.
Yeah.
I think Conor has a chance. He definitely has a chance. Both of them are counter punchers, defensive fighters, but Conor is more aggressive in trying to get a reaction for you to come in at him. But Floyd is a defensive mastermind. So I think the fight's I think Conor, he's 5'9", 74-inch reach. Against, I think Mayweather's 5'8", and I don't know his reach, but
I think the advantage Conor does have is he's much younger, a lot younger, and so and Mayweather's been out of the sport for a while now.
I think it's been 4 years.
Yeah, so there is an advantage there. So the potential of a knockout's possible, But
it has to come in the earlier rounds.
yeah, it has to happen early.
Yeah.
If not, I could see Conor getting gassed out and it becoming a very boring fight past the 6th round.
I don't know about gassing out. I think with MMA, the aspects of MMA is that you have to defend the takedown, defend the clinch, and defend jiu-jitsu, and that takes a lot more energy. Boxing, you just have to conserve it correctly. I know there's 12 rounds.
Yeah, there's a lot more rounds,
12
and the
rounds,
rounds are pretty
3
long as well.
3 minutes each. But I think Conor will make the right adjustments. I just think that if he can get to, I think the first 4 rounds is his best chance to win. After that, it's probably going to be some type of, defensive battle.
Yeah, and I'm kind of curious to like how he's been training because he's been hyping up this fight for a long time, even before it got signed. And so I'm kind of curious how he's been training. If he's been waiting to train until like this point, he's in big trouble because the fight's coming up in like 3 months, not even 3 months, 2 months.
Yeah.
So he's in big trouble if he's waited to sign on the contract before he started training. But knowing Conor, he's probably been training before. I'm just curious what kind of training he's been doing.
All he's been doing is boxing for the past couple months. So I think he was prepping for this already, and he's gonna probably make $100 million.
They're both gonna make over $100 million.
Yeah, Floyd's probably gonna make 150.
Yeah,
plus.
I mean, I don't see HBO not giving them each $100 million.
Yeah.
And Dana White knew going in that these guys are gonna be making bank.
Yeah.
Out of this fight.
But yeah, I mean, I think to conclude, that's what sports is about. You can see like these build-ups, and you can actually see physically people coming in and fighting, and that's the hype. That's the, that's what you get hyped for, because after you see them box, you're gonna try boxing, for sure. So
I guess just to say, put in my say as a neutral, I don't really. I mean, I watch the sport ish. I understand the sport kinda, but as a neutral, I don't know if y'all seen, but you got the recent Godzilla.
Yeah.
Where they're talking, and he was like, "Dude, what do we do?" And the Asian guy's just like,
"Let them fight."
Yeah, let them fight. That's me. I'm just like, dude, I don't care what happens. Just go for it. I'll sit back. I'll watch the news. I'm there for the hype. If whatever happens. I honestly prefer Conor win because I'm like Floyd based on what happened in the last fight. I'm like, that's kind of lame. It's not enjoy the fight. But I mean, I don't know technical boxing, so whatever it is what it is. But I think that's all we have for today for this podcast. I'm PK.
I'm Siachi.
And I'm Flu.
And thanks for listening to us. If you guys got offended, job well done to us. Hopefully they got your mind thinking and your heart racing.
Like and subscribe and comment down below too.
Yes.
So thanks for listening to us, guys. Ramble on for about an hour or so. So
peace out.
All right. See you guys.